understands defeat, and the people who are around you who understands defeat, and then what makes them tick to overcome defeat and to be a champion, and the life's learning from doing all these sports. The important thing is building character. So that's one of the reasons that we tend to employ people, who come from a very strong sporting background.
Right. So on that note, Diane, we'll take a small break and we will be back with you soon. You're watching Roundtable, and we are with Mr. Diane Gomez. He's a Group Director of MAS Holdings and also the Managing Director of MAS Intimates. So first of all, we spoke and talked about creating a winning culture, and actually what Diane has done in his fields and also at Slimline to create a winning culture. So he touched on how important it was to look at the grassroots and look at the employees' needs and address those needs, and also how he has used sports as a tool to bring people together and importance of sportsmen and women in the corporate sector. Diane, moving on, I would like to ask you now, because you have so much passion and commitment towards the field of sports, why is Sri Lanka failing in sports? Why has not Sri Lanka actually been able to make many gold medalists and participate more in the other events and athletic events and so on and so forth?
I think Sri Lanka can win medals. But the main issue that we have is we don't have a very clear long-term plan. To win an Olympic medal, it virtually will take something like 12 years minimum, and mid-term plan and a short-term plan. That's number one. What is our vision? What is our end goal? End goal is winning an Olympic medal, winning a World Cricket Championship like 1996, and then the issue is picking the talent, and the third thing is giving technology. For an example, I could take something like boxing. We realized, we had a long-term plan of nearly 10 years, 8 to 10 years, that because in the 60s we were really good in boxing, and then the medals just diminished. We got a Cuban coach, because Cuba is a top boxing country, and we got a Cuban coach so that we can bring technology. The third thing we did was expose our athletes internationally so that they got the fighting battle experience. Now, why sports failing is it's an administration problem. You have got the wrong administrators in the job, in the people who come to sports as administrators. What is their sporting background? They have never touched a ball, they have never played a stroke of cricket or any other thing, and they are there. And why are they there? We need to ask. It's either they are interested in getting into politics, they are interested in some other vested interest. So the whole focus of a long-term or a short-term plan of winning a medal for the country is just thrown away by few administrators who are just there for their vested interest. And unfortunately, the government has not dealt, and I am sure that they will deal with it now, to eliminate those people who are in sports for their vested interest. So if you take that factor off, then we can move forward. The second thing why we can't win medals is the sporting bodies are elected, and some are by interim committee, which shouldn't be there. It all depends on the votes. So for an example, instead of spending the money on the athletes, they spend the money on the administrators for their votes, or send them on a joyride so that they can count their vote when it comes to election time. So the whole idea of representing your country and winning a medal is lost, and it's a really sad state when we can do it. To produce a next Susantika Jayasinghe or Anuruddha Ratnayaka, it'll take a long time.
So what are your recommendations? What has to be done in terms of getting this administrative right and appointing the right people with a sporting background? In addition to that, what changes and reforms should even the government look into?
You see, the government must have key performance indicators. It's like the Australian sport. If you don't perform, you are out. And you know, I've been involved in sports for nearly 10 years, and I've been the president of boxing for 5 years. The government has never asked. We have given a strategy plan. I have given a personally strategy plan when I was the president of boxing for the next 12 years. What would be the coaching, what would be the talent scouting, what would be all, you know, a lot of other strategic initiatives. But nobody from the government, you know, is checking where are we now, you know, what have you achieved in the last 5 years, you know, what would take you or the funding required for you to get the medal. And most of the time the funding has come from private donorship. And so the reason is you need to do, the government need to check where we are now and what it takes to win. So that's a tough call, and I think we have got a new minister now, and I'm sure you know, he would most probably look at some performance indicators. So it's like it's, you know, sports is like running an organization. You have a chief executive, you have, you know, the rest of the people, and each one must be given a task to achieve. But we mix our priorities all the time.
So now again, coming back to now, exactly that has to apply to the sports sector as well. Similarly, so many fields in Sri Lanka has to develop if Sri Lanka is to actually be called a developed country. So as you're saying, sports is one section, and the other section you have actually authority to talk about in some sense is branding, because there's you're also the head of branding when it comes to MAS, and also sports is a tool that actually Sri Lanka can be branded, because Sri Lanka was very well known in the world for conflict. Yes. But now it's a post-conflict era. So how do you think that Sri Lanka can and should be branded?
I think Sri Lanka can be branded in numerous ways. Since I come from the apparel industry is branded all over the world for ethical manufacturing. We are one of the best countries in ethical manufacturing, and that was one of the reasons that we were given the GSP Plus by the European Union. So we tend to brand ourselves, whether it's Slimline or MAS Holdings, or whether it's Brandex or Hydra Monies. All of us as a organization, total Sri Lankan organizations, brand that Sri Lanka is a destination for ethical manufacturing. Now we have taken it to the next step by saying it's a social responsible employer, you know, and we are environmental friendly, and recently MAS Thurali won an award, a global award for social responsibility and on green manufacturing. So we are now moving towards an era where that to the Western consumer is very important, where it's produced. There's no child labor here. So that's one way of branding. The second way of branding is, what is the most sustainable industry this country can have is tourism. So whether we could brand ourselves on ecotourism, because we have all the aspects that we could brand ourselves against Thailand or China or any other countries in those niche markets. And I think the post-conflict era, Sri Lanka will brand itself. Maybe it's a little miracle, and maybe it's the place for manufacturing lingerie in the most ethical manufacturing standards. So I think that's the way I think we should go forward. And the next thing is, how can we adopt ourselves? We have been very resilient for 30 years. How we can adopt ourselves with breakthrough thinking? How can we think something different for the next 20 years? Because we tend to moan and groan of things all the time. You know, rather than moan and groan, let's get on with the job. Let's move the country forward. So if everybody gets into that thinking, we could move forward, because there's no war. There are no bombs going off in Colombo. You know, there's no bombing in Vaunia. It's a free country.
But Diane, also there's a lot of negativity in the environment, and as you said, people tend to complain and always focus on the negative aspects. It can be with respect to anything, with clearing of the IDPs, clearing of the landmine. Of course, these are very grave, serious issues, but there is sometimes a sense of urgency and always focusing mainly on the negative aspects.
Yes.
So as a actually a corporate radical who has revolutionized things in a corporate setup,
yes,
how important is positive thinking,
yes,
and how have you actually reaped benefits by having such a mind framework?
I can give you one good example. When my office is situated in Borupana Ratmalana, and nearly 500 meters from my office is where Hindu College, Ratmalana Hindu College is situated. And when nearly 200 odd child soldiers came there, the government asked what, as corporate citizens, what we could do. And the first thing I went there, and you could see these young kids from 14, 15, 16, girls and boys, I felt so sad. I mean, unfortunately, they were there in the school because, they were child soldiers. And what we did was, we want to make a difference. We nearly spent nearly 2.5 million rupees refurbishing some of those dormitories. We completely cleared the grounds. We brought in sporting goods because we wanted them to be real children, not to take a gun, but to take a cricket bat. Then I put a coach and started boxing. And initially it was a little bit difficult because I had talked to the army. And to my luck, Lieutenant General Jagat Jayasuriya, the commander of the army, is the vice president of Sri Lanka Boxing. So I told Jagat, it would be a great story. The one-knee commander who did the offensive on Prabhakaran, taking a boxer, for the 2016 Olympic Games, as the president of Sri Lanka Boxing. So we started, boxing, at Hindu College. And now the boys have gone to Vavuniya. They have been sent back to the parents, and they still want to continue. And we also are setting up a plant in Omante. So I told the boys before they left, unfortunately, I can't speak in Tamil because I'm a Sinhalese. And but I got an interpreter and told them, look, when we come to Omante, we're going to start boxing there. And that's where the new talent is coming from. Toughened guys who had, fought a war at 14 years, would be boxing for Sri Lanka in maybe 2016 Olympics. So we can do it. And if I could think, you could think, and everybody could think, these are our kids. We had a conflict, put it back to history. We need to move forward. We need to reconcile. We need to make the country move in every sphere. So we are starting with apparel and maybe sports. And I think it's amazing how people get involved. It's amazing how people come to a camp to understand, because I'm a die-hard nationalist.
That's another topic we need to talk about.
I believe that as Sri Lankans, we need to fight LTT the same way that we fight them, because to win, to eliminate terrorism. But once it is finished, we need to make a difference to those people in the north, because, I don't want to see another era of conflict in 25 years.
Okay, Dan. So we will take a small break and we will be back with you soon. Stay with us. You're watching Roundtable, and we are speaking to Mr. Dian Gomez. He is the Managing Director of MAS Intimates and also the Group Director of MAS Holdings. So in the second half, we touched upon the concepts of as to why sports is failing in Sri Lanka in a time that actually sports can be used as a branding tool to brand Sri Lanka and put Sri Lanka on the sports map. And actually the role of the government in also having the right administrators in place where they will have sports knowledge about sports, because it's also running like like running a company. So every field is like running a company that will be results oriented, according to Dan. And also the importance of branding Sri Lanka, where he said how important it is to be ethical in branding and also taking Sri Lanka to the next level with a winning mindset. So winning mindset is something that we stopped our discussion on, Dan. I wanted to ask you on the same lines that when it comes to the apparel industry, how will MAS Holdings also keep the competitive advantage and also makes that Sri Lanka can face the competition and go to the world market? How can you actually retain that competitive